Live streaming is on.
Can't miss that. All right, welcome. Welcome to this 2-hour tutorial, Transform 2021. Very excited to have a look today at geothermal well testing. And our instructors here are going to take you through some really cool material in Python, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I don't want to forget to thank our sponsors for this event, Studio X. Thank you very much for supporting this open content and open science. There's a bit of info in the description below the video if you're watching. Well, I'm guessing you're watching this on YouTube. If you're watching it live, then you can participate in the chat in the Software Underground Slack. So go to softwareunderground.org/Slack to join up there if you haven't done that already, and look for the T21 Thurs Geothermal channel, and we'll see you in there. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Irene and Katie, and yeah, have fun. See you later.
I guess it's us now.
It's all yours.
Off you go.
Hey,
You introduce yourself.
oh, okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Katie McLean. Me and Irene are in New Zealand, obviously. We have about 10 years, been in the industry about 10 years. I'm a reservoir engineer. I've just done a PhD in reservoir engineering, so, you know, quite focused there. And I work at Contact Energy at Wairake, like the oldest geothermal power station in New Zealand.
Oh, and the first wet steam field in the world to be developed.
Correct. Yes.
It's like and pioneering process engineering for separation. Like let's not play that down.
Yeah. And this is Irene.
Hi. So my name's Irene. I'm a geoscientist, geothermal geoscientist. I nudge slightly into Katie's world and play with reservoir engineering, but would never market myself as one.
She's really good.
And I'm actually doing a PhD at Auckland University, where the Geothermal Institute is here in New Zealand, and I also consult in geothermal. And yeah, I've known you for a long time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen real quick so that you can read some intro stuff while we talk about how this is all going to happen today. Oh, you got it? Okay, so we're here for 2 hours, so in for the long haul. But what we have is actually something that's kind of actually too big to present in the 2-hour tutorial, because I started talking to Katie about putting something like this together, I don't know, ages ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A year or two ago.
And sat down with Katie a couple of months ago with a whiteboard, and she sketched everything she wanted out of a completion testing tool, which was a lot. Like no small aspirations there. So this is the first cut of the tool that I've coded up for Katie. I'm super stoked. There's lots of things that we want to add, of course, in the future.
Just for me.
Just for you.
Yeah.
And you know, the other geothermal reservoir engineers of the world. But it's functional in the first cut, and we're really thrilled to be able to share it with you. As Matt said, look, hop on over into the Slack channel for Software Underground. There's a great community there. They will be able to help you with your technical questions during this. There's also, I noticed, some geothermal experts in the channel. Like, you can't hide.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, terrifying. don't tell me who they are.
So don't feel free to ask your geothermal questions as well. Please note that the live stream is about 40 seconds behind where we are. We're going to take a break for an hour. Not for an hour.
For an hour.
For 10 minutes in the middle. And if you have not already, and I'll show you this in a moment, you should download the tutorial materials or access the tutorial materials through GitHub. And so this is the link here. So if we just kill that, if you are watching this live on the live stream, you're actually able to pause. And so if you're feeling a little left behind or you want to just think about something for a moment, then please do pause. If you're watching this on YouTube later, we're Kiwi, so we talk really fast. And have a funny accent. So
so the accent's the bigger problem.
The accent's probably the bigger problem. So so down in the right hand corner of the video, you'll find a setting where you can actually like slow us down to make us a little bit more comprehensible, or if you're like wanting to code along. So this is the GitHub repository here. You can download yourself a zip file of everything that's in here and work with it. And there's some pretty detailed instructions for like how you can get set up to interact with this tutorial. And so as well as watching this live stream, with thanks to Steve Purvis, he has loaded the tutorial into this neat tool called CurveNote. So it looks like a nice book, but it is static. And so you won't be able to interact with code, but you'll be able to like read through the content and see what's going on. So I guess that's the management view, is it? Yeah.
Yeah. Probably not everyone uses Python.
No,
it turns out. So
shocking. We should all use Python. There's also, thanks Thomas Martin, who helped us set up with Google Collaboratory, Google Collab. It's a cloud way to run these notebooks. And so it means you don't have to install anything in your computer. The Google Colab settings and the local settings are a little bit different. And so the notebooks, as you download them, are set up to run in Google Colab. So it's nice and easy for people there. And I'll show you guys the last step of getting started with Google Colab, which is mounting your drive, in a minute, and show you that environment. And then we're going to switch to the Anaconda setup, which is where you run these notebooks locally. And so if you're keen on doing this sort of thing yourself in the future, Anaconda's an amazing package that was actually developed for science people who don't want to have to do all of the wraparound IT stuff, like that want that quick start for getting set up, you know, like, because initially that can feel like a bit of a barrier. Yes. And big thanks to Martin Bentley for testing out our local install method and also helping with some date time debugging. And anybody who works in any kind of coding knows date time is a challenge. So yeah. So we'll just switch quickly over to Google Colab to get people started in that space. If you followed the instructions on the GitHub page, wow, that is really small. You'll end up inside this folder, and you'll be able to launch an Ipython notebook, which is these extensions. Here we go. Sorry, IPYNB. You'll be able to launch it with Google Collaboratory. If you don't have this already in your options, you're going to have to connect it to your Google Drive. So you just go to connect more apps and install it.
Yeah, and Irene wrote out the instructions on how to actually do that yesterday. So yeah, they're in the notes.
They're in the notes. To give it a moment to load. Cool. And so you end up in these notebooks that we'll be running through. But the extra step, just for the Google Colab people, is doing this thing called mounting your drive, which basically means telling your notebook where to look for the data, because we're going to be installing some data. So let's quickly run through that step before we switch over. I never know how long things are going to take when you've got extra screen sharing and loads of stuff happening, live streaming. And all right, so it runs up this thing where it gives you a browser link. Okay, I'm going to sign in with my Google account. I'm going to give it permission. I'm going to copy the link, and I'm going to head back here and insert it. Right, and so now it's mounted, and we can do things like put our cursor inside the cell and hit Shift Return. right? And it runs that cell, and this cell is just to grab this image that Katie has put together for us, provided for us, or you can hit an arrow on the side to run a cell. One other thing I do for the Google Colab people is come up here to view, and I would expand sections. And it just makes it a little easier to work through so that you'll be able to see all of the code as we scroll through. So I will actually leave that up. So people who've been through the Anaconda setup process can come into either Jupyter Notebooks or Jupyter Lab. I'm a huge Jupyter Lab fan myself because just the layout and the way that you can work. Also, it gives you can install things that give you like a neat heading outline of your notebook, which is really nice. So there's lots of tools inside Jupyter Lab. It's worth taking the time to get to know this environment if this is something that you'd like to do in the future. But yeah, we're conscious it takes a little while to get up and going. So for the Jupyter Lab people, we're going to be commenting out some of the little bits that are set up for the Google Colab people as we go along. And I think that's all the housekeeping.
Irene,
Yeah?
sorry, it's Matt here. Just one small thing. I wonder if you could boost the text size a couple notches in these notebooks. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, it's perfectly fine. I think it'll be perfect. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely spot on. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Awesome. So how this is going to run is we do have 4 quite chunky notebooks that we're going to be working through. I'm hoping that we'll get actually the intro and then 2 and 3 looking at temperature and injectivity, so well capacity done mostly before the break, and maybe finish off injectivity after the break. And then we're going to look at some feedzone stuff, which is kind of a chunkier method. For people, reservoir engineers who would really like to do this for themselves, this notebook is quite large. It has a lot of different bits of code for setting up data. We are not going to go through this really step by step. We're going to focus on 2, 3, and 4, but it is heavily documented, so it'll help you get up and running, working with your own data. But I think to start with, because I know we've got a real mix of people, the question is, what's a geothermal system when we're talking about a geothermal system, Katie?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like we're going to cover a lot of material with not very much time.
Yeah.
This is actually not my figure. This is from the book.
The book. Yes, Katie's book.
I co-authored with my supervisor a couple of years ago, and this figure was actually provided by Brian Lovelock from Jacobs here in New Zealand. When we talk about geothermal systems, for the purposes of this tutorial, we're just discussing what we call conventional geothermal systems. So that's where there's like a localized heat source, which here in New Zealand is shallow crustal magma, or in other places, this is a high background heat flow, and that produces a plume of heated fluid that rises towards the surface because of buoyancy. If you look in the figure, the part of that heated plume that's close enough to the surface to be reached by drilling is what we refer to as the geothermal reservoir. And so that's an interesting definition because it depends on the depth of drilling, which is typically down about 3 kilometres. If we could drill to 6 kilometres, our systems would get a lot bigger. But that's a discussion for another time.
It's like lots of discussion about like how productive that would be, because there's this balance. If you're going really deep in these conventional systems, you need a lot of heat and a fair amount of permeability to actually get the fluid to lift to surface. And so I guess the focus traditionally for geothermal has been to develop the shallower outflow portions of the resources because it's easier to flow those wells. It's cheaper to drill, and actually arguably less difficult to target. You know, like once you're targeting the deep areas, it gets pretty tough. So.
Yeah, hotter, deeper, right into the upflow. It's not always better.
Yeah.
But it might be.
It might be. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot
in some
of
circumstances.
Yeah. There's a lot of work, and so there is a whole range of resources in the world who take different approaches to development.
Yeah. So there's many ways of classifying geothermal systems. There's geological classifications. There's like classifications by temperature. There's classification by enthalpy, which I like.
Classifications by geochemistry as well.
Geochemistry, exergy. Yeah, all kinds of things. But the one that we like to use in reservoir engineering the most is enthalpy, because we find there's a lot more commonality between fields that have similar enthalpy than just temperature itself. And it tells you what the dominant heat transfer mechanism is in your field, whether that be convection or advection or conduction. And Irene seems to really like that as a geologist. So that was cool. That was exciting for me.
The reason I liked the enthalpy classification as a geologist, like a lot of my research focus has been around characterizing permeability and like controls on permeabilities in different systems. And there's kind of a mapping of this enthalpy classification system onto permeability, because if you have a two-phase vapor-dominated system, its pressure is actually can be quite a bit lower than the surrounding groundwater. And so it says things about how protected it is from side recharge from that inflow.
Yeah.
You know, like whereas
you wouldn't have that high enthalpy of a field or a steam field if it was permeable enough for water to get in there. Yeah. So this enthalpy classification system maps really well onto permeability. You know, like if you had like and also just in thinking in terms of developed systems, if it's very low enthalpy, often you need like a very good permeability to be able to get them to productively flow and develop this kind of this interplay relationship. Yeah, totally. So an example, Wairiki is, can they see the cursor?
Matt, can they see the cursor?
It doesn't matter. Wairiki is a two-phase liquid-dominated field, but that can be low, medium, high enthalpy. Wairiki is low enthalpy. Enthalpies, maybe between 1,050 and 1,100 kilojoules per kilogram. And it's extremely permeable.
It's a beast.
Yeah, it's huge and like massively interconnected and very permeable. Whereas like I know Irene's worked on some other fields in New Zealand that have higher enthalpy,
but are a little tighter. But like you know, the classic is something like geysers in the States, which is if you caught Thomas's talk, he talked a little bit about it. It's a vapor-dominated system.
We don't have any of those.
We don't have any of those in New Zealand. There's actually not many in the world. There's a small handful. Laterallo is another one in Italy, and they're much tighter, but you still get this nice flow out of them because of the steam. Cool. But we're mostly interested today in geothermal wells, which pretty closely resemble oil and gas wells in terms of how they're drilled, although we tend to, it's pretty unusual to find a geothermal well deviated over about 25 degrees, you know, like in some settings where you're really tracing structural permeability, you might deviate a little bit more. But we're not running with geosteering assemblies. We're running with, like, I guess from an oil and gas perspective, like an older technology, particularly because of the thermal conditions. You know, like we're pretty good at cooking tools if you're not careful.
Yeah.
The
mud is a big difference.
The mud is a big difference as well.
Yeah.
You know, like you guys drill with an air water mix, right?
The productive section,
The productive
So
section.
if you look in the picture, the upper sections of the casing that end up cemented anyway are typically drilled using mud, like for well control. But when you get down into the productive part of the reservoir, you potentially want that entire interval to be like safeguarded for potential future production, because you don't know yet where your fluid's going to be coming from in the reservoir. So you want the whole thing to be clean. So we drill with like aerated water.
Yeah, and some people also drill with just water and a guar gum sweep at each connection to lift the cuttings out. And the idea is you don't want to damage your permeability. Then you squat a perforated liner in the bottom of the well. So there might be like a liner hanger. But
like it's perforated before it goes in. It's like the whole thing
the
is
whole thing's perforated.
Just about the whole thing.
Yeah, there's little blank intervals. It's a detail. It's an
Yeah.
important detail, but
Yeah.
beyond today. So that's kind of key in terms of this well testing, is that we're talking about like not knowing until we've done these completion tests really where the permeability is. It's not forecastable with petrophysics in the same way that's in oil and gas.
Geophysics in oil and gas is amazing.
I know.
They know where it is before they drill it. They drill it there on purpose.
Anyway, that's a whole nother story. So we're going to be talking about some pretty cool tools today, some data from some pretty cool tools, and in particular this pressure temperature spinner tool.
The main tool we ever use in geothermal.
Yeah. Well, like if you're I'm more of a open hole logging expert, so like do a little bit of pitch physics for geothermal and an awful lot of image log for geothermal.
Oh, totally. Not the only tool.
Not the only tool.
No.
And they have casing tools. So I would like to, but in terms of reservoir engineering, this is the tool.
Yeah, totally. So we'll run a PTS logs in every single geothermal well. We like to have also borehole image logs in wells, but we don't always get approval to run those. But PTS tool happens every single time. So that captures the pressure, temperature, and spinner. So you can see in the image, the spinner is like a little impeller which sits in the bottom and spins, and that is incredibly useful for knowing where fluid flow is going in the well during injection or production, or in or out of feed zones, and all this kind of thing. And this tool is suspended on wireline, and during completion testing, cold water is also being injected into the well at the same time. So there's the downhole tool, that black box down in the well, and it's suspended on wireline with an E-line, so it can transmit data in real time to the surface, and you can view it in the logging truck, and at the same time injecting cold water into the side valve of the well. And that is how we set up for completion testing. The objectives of completion testing. Well, completion testing is what you do as soon as drilling's finished. And that's followed by heating runs, and then often followed by output testing if it's going to be a production well.
So the completion testing is where you're injecting into the well and running this log.
Oh yeah.
The heating runs are where you've
stopped
injecting, you've closed the well, and so you're not injecting, and you log it like static. Yeah. And so it also gets called a shut PT, like a shut run. And then the production logs, you're actually flowing the well and running the tool, which can be pretty tricky.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Just put enough weights on it. Just calculate the right
flow.
number of weights, and it's fine.
It's fine.
So when you're doing the completion testing, the main objectives are to identify the permeable feed zones in the well, including whether there's one of those that's dominant, which we would call the major feed zone. So feed zones are these discrete depths within the well at which fluid enters the well or exits, as the case may be, during injection. And you need to know where those are And also you get an indication of the future potential of the well when it's in service. So how much water you're going to be able to inject into it if it's an injection well, and how good of a producer it's going to be if that's its fate in the future.
Cool.
So that's a pretty brief overview of geothermal wells. Broadly, the types of testing we do. Yeah, there's a lot more information in the book that we wrote, and yeah, we hope to do more of these notebooks in the future.
Yep.
But we're just focusing on completion
tests. Yeah. So we're not going to cover
logical place to
sorry
start.
About the scrolling, folks. I'm just remembering where I'm up to. So we're just going to cover part of the completion testing. We're not going to do what's Katie's specialty is pressure transient testing.
Oh yeah, well testing is a very broad term that covers a lot of things and can be confusing. Yeah, I did my PhD on pressure transient analysis, which is a type of well testing. Testing also covers any type of testing you do in a well testing. So yeah.
So we're just going to breeze through this notebook and just talk about a couple of key issues when handling data. One of the reasons why using Python instead of Excel is it records the steps that you undertake. And when you get a raw data set from a service provider, there's often things in there that you only need parts of, or there may be data issues. And so you have to go through this preconditioning process in order to be able to do analysis. And one of the things I really love is, you can remove data and have a record of that. And so it's going to make the methods auditable, traceable, and I think repeatable, which is important. Like a lot of talk about how important repeatability is in science. When you're doing resource science, that's pretty important as well.
Oh, I think it's going to be massively important, in my job, even just like if I find some of the results we process from this data, like if I find a fluid velocity profile in our database at work, I don't just take that profile because I don't know what they did to get that. Like I always end up reprocessing the data myself, and it doesn't take that long, but because there's no record of what they did, which type of fit they used, whether they removed any data, anything. So
really inefficient.
Yeah. Well, most people don't go back and reprocess fluid. It's just me. Depends how much detail you want to go into.
You're a details person.
I'm a details person.
I love it. So what I've done by coming up here and running all cells is I've run all the cells of this notebook, and I know the PTS data file that we're dealing with has 100,000 rows in it, which is not an unusual data file size. It's not an especially long test. You can get really big ones, and that's the other benefit here is because Excel really strains under the weight of the data volume. We're going to be using a tool called Pandas, which is a real sort of amazing data science library that generates these quite familiar things that look length mismatch. That's because I've run the processing and it really hates. Do not run this notebook out of order. I love liveness. So here we go. Right. We've got it to run.
The first cell.
The first cell. The first cell. It's my first time doing coding live, and it's just already the wheels have fallen off. It's awesome. Loving it. All right. So for the reservoir engineers who would like to do this in the future, your own personal nightmare, and I will share a video in Slack, is date time. Yeah, it's okay. You will get date time in various forms from your contractors. This is really cool. We had one of the contractors here who generated date time in the best possible format, which is the ISO format. If there's any service providers out there, I encourage you to go and check out the ISO format. Like a nice static text field in an ISO format is ideal. And once we get everybody doing this, it'll make life so much easier.
Should tell them the story about South Africa.
I can't. Another time. We have had some great fun debugging these notebooks. However, in the PTS data set that we have here, you'll notice we've got a year, month, day field. And then we have an hours field. I can't rerun the cell because I reran the whole notebook. But trust me when I say that all of the hours in the entire notebook were double zeros, and this is for a 9-hour test, and which was some sort of
formatting
bug,
issue.
some sort of formatting issue. But what they did have in here was an Excel float time. In the back of Excel, and this is like a deep request. Please never use Excel time if you can ever kind of avoid it. And in the back, there's it's in bold. we should avoid it wherever possible. If you want to go and read about Excel date time, please, I encourage you. The short version is there are two. It's time since elapsed time since a particular start time, and there's two different start times. So the first question that you ask is, I've been given a notebook, and I have to hack into the back of the notebook and get out of the settings what that start time is before I can even start working with that time. And then, because date time is this horribly complex thing, there are recognized bugs in the way it's handled in the back that I think, like many programmers, at some point they just threw their hands up and went, we're not going to deal with that. So it's also naive time. So it doesn't tell you what time zone, and so if you're somebody who ships tools around the world, having your data logger really clearly tying back to UTC time, or being really clear what time zone, is really important, because otherwise you might be recording some kind of weird shift. So that's enough about daytime pain. You'll notice that now we have a data frame. We've been through a bunch of steps that I won't go through in detail, so we can go and do the fun stuff in this tutorial. But we've ended up with this nice, clean data frame with a nice, tidy date time and like some nice, easy headings to use in just the data.
Actual useful things that we need.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah. As opposed to we get provided lots of stuff that's good for QCing.
Yeah.
But as
at the end of the day, we want pressure, temperature, frequency, tool speed.
Yep. Yep. So depth. Yeah.
That's
depth. So this is a view of our data set. This is just two parts. So what we're doing is we're pumping into the well at one rate, and then we increased the pump rate, and then we dropped the pump rate down to an intermediate pump rate, and then the pumps were shut off. And then all three of these remaining plots is a plot of the logging tool going into the well, staying stationary at a programmed depth that Katie would have set, and then going up and down and up and down, and then it goes back to its programmed depth, and then up and down and up and down. And so this program is a sequence that acquires the data that you need. So we're going to be using 3 sets of these data, not the top one, but like a quick intro to our data. Did you want to talk about the 3?
Sure. So different parts of the data set are used for different types of analysis. So when we're looking at temperature profiles during injection, for example, you notice like for each flow rate, so this is the first flow rate in the top, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 even. 7 profiles where the tool is moving. So if you want to take a temperature profile, from 400 meters down to 900 meters or whatever that is, there's 7 profiles you could potentially take, and we know with the tools that we typically use, that the temperatures when the tools are moving downwards are more accurate than when the tool is moving upwards. There's like the tools don't equilibrate that quickly,
and
so the
direction.
The up profiles are always hotter than they should be, and then the down profiles are always more accurate. So what we do is take the latest possible down profile when we're looking at temperature, and so that's what's highlighted in that second plot. So for each injection rate, so the first injection rate, second injection rate, third injection rate, it's like one temperature profile for each. And later on, when the pumps are shut, so there's no flow and the well has started heating, after 1 hour, we take like a 1 hour heating profile as well. So that's for temperature analysis, which we'll talk about later. One of the main things we do as well is to determine the injectivity index of the well, which gives you an indication of the potential future well capacity, be that injection, if it's an injection well, or it can give you an indication of productivity after the well heats, if it's going to be a production well. So for that, what you need from the data set is simply 3 points, which are flow rate and pressure, stable pressure. And so we take, and when you change the flow rate, it takes a while for the pressure to stabilize. And exactly how it stabilizes is a whole field called pressure transient analysis, which I could go down a rabbit hole and like bore you with for hours.
It wouldn't be boring. It'd be amazing, but not today.
Not
in
today.
future.
Yeah. So for example, when we're changing from flow rate 1 to flow rate 2, and the tool is sitting at that like set depth for, gosh, how long is this one? Like a couple of hours at least. There'll be a pressure transient, so that the pressure change resulting from that flow rate will be recorded during that time. Oh, and that's highlighted in green up on the top. But then what you want to have at the end of that is the stable pressure at that depth, like as stable as possible. So you take the very latest value for pressure at that depth. So in this case, this will be like after you run the profiles and the tool's gone back to being stationary, you sit there and record like that stable pressure, like, you know, as late as possible after the flow change. And the first one you measure like at the end of injection rate 1. There's a funny quirk with this particular data set where for the third flow rate, you'd really want to take the data point after the profiles every time. But in this case, the pumps were shut off too quickly, and so the actual stable pressure there wasn't recorded. So as a backup or a alternative, we've just taken like the stable pressure from prior to the profiles, and that's fine. It's especially just for a well like this where it's so
huge,
injective anyway. It's not going to make that much difference to the results.
Part of the real world of handling real world data, you know, like
just you do a program, but what actually comes out of the field is never what is exactly in the program. Which is kind of cool. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have a job. So. You have to be there. Something always happens. And when you do the fluid velocity analysis, so that's looking at the spinner data, so that's from the little impeller at the bottom of the PTS tool. Speak louder. Okay. You have to take the entire set of profiles for each injection rate. So these are the ones highlighted in yellow on the bottom. So for each of the 3 injection rates, there's a whole set of profiles, and you crunch all those together and get out a single fluid velocity profile telling you what's the velocity of the fluid being injected into the well at every depth down the well. And that's quite cool. That's
that's kind of the fun stuff. And actually that's notebook 4. And was the challenge Katie issued me. And thanks, Katie.
You did good.
Cool. So everything in this notebook has actually been wrapped into a function that is now included in the top of the rest of the notebook. So you'll find for the non-Python people, we're gonna like run this cell with lots of code in it, and they're basically like helper functions, and they do sorry, still scrolling. A couple of the helper functions are going to do everything we saw in the first notebook. So before we start talking, I'm going to run that. Actually, just a little thing for the Google Colab people, you're going to have to run this pip install the steam tables. This is how we like calculate saturation pressure for the temperature at which at a given pressure the fluid will boil. It's not a standard in Google Colab, so you'll have to run this cell. But if you made this using the environment file provided in the Git repo for the Anaconda people, you'll already have it. So we're just going to run a couple of cells here because you'll notice that that the flow rate is pretty quick to run. But the importing that PTS data and that read PTS helper function is going to go through all of the steps from the previous notebook, and that takes a minute. So we'll
this is the elevator music
section. Please hold user. And because we're still getting used to our live stream setting, I've just noticed we never turn our camera on, and so we can do that over here.
Oh. It was on before, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it stops every time you unshare and share. So, yeah. So anyway, Katie, what do we do with temperature logs?
Well,
the short version.
Yeah, but it's going to have to be the short version. But these are like, well, in our opinion, the most important data we require in geothermal, for obvious reasons, is that geothermal is thermal, like it utilizes heat energy from the earth. But we're all about permeability as well. You need temperature and you need permeability, but you kind of need temperature first.
That's a nod to me. I'm a permeability person, so
yeah.
Yes, you also need
temperature. I'm a temperature person.
There's a compromise.
This is a good team.
Yeah.
The way we use temperature logs in the geothermal industry for this is a non-exhaustive list, but I use them a lot in sort of completion testing and heat output testing to identify feed zones. The potential production, I guess, from the well. Interpreting well or reservoir events. So wells don't stay the same with time. So what you interpret and the condition of the well at the completion test is not going to be the way the well is forever. So, when things happen to the well, change where the feed zones are, change the temperature in the well, change the pressure conditions in the well because there's pressure drawdown in the reservoir. Temperature logs are very helpful for interpreting sort of events through the life of the well. Natural state temperature profiles are...
It's my field.
I should actually get Irene to talk about that because that's more Irene's field. It's not so easy to get a natural state temperature profile because the temperature you measure in the wellbore is not necessarily the temperature, well, it's almost never the actual temperature in the reservoir, but they're really, really, really important for constraint and conceptual models, which is all Irene. So I'll just let her do that.
And that's a really important point for understanding your resource at large. Reservoir engineers and geoscientists work really closely because they should. Okay, maybe they don't everywhere. Maybe we're just special. What I really want to know is what's going on at the reservoir. Katie wants to know this too, but I have a slightly different take. I'm looking at, what is the natural state of the reservoir before we started doing things, before we started drilling things, because it tells me about the thermodynamic processes of the resource, the heat and mass transfer through the resource, which also can help me understand how should this resource be developed. And I think the most important point is that the temperature you measure inside the well, and we're going to really see that in a minute, is not necessarily the temperature out in the reservoir. And it depends on when that log was acquired, what was happening before it was acquired, how long ago the well was drilled, what's been happening in the reservoir, all of these things. And like often somebody like me is given 30 or 40 temperature logs across a well lifetime and going unravel this story, and it's very like, what geoscientists do with an outcrop, you have this thing that's like 4D compression, like space plus time, and you have to pick it all through, like what was happening when, and how do you get back to what is actually the resource behind this data. So it's fun, tricky. I love data.
And given how heavily it's used in that context, it's very important that you are sure you're looking at an actual natural state temperature profile.
Because we use these along with the responses through time to build finite element heat mass transfer models that you calibrate to the data that you have, and they're Ford models, like the new Ford model. If I do this much production and do injection here, what is going to happen to that system? So you need to have this fully realized conceptual model, this concept, this abstraction of what you think in the subsurface in order to do that. And Katie mentioned earlier that geophysics is tricky to do. There's no such thing as, there's a couple of resources in the world that have a little bit of reflection seismic, but because of attenuation, that doesn't really work much in geothermal. And our reflectors are often quite steep in volcanic terrains anyway. We don't have a fully realized 3D model sometimes in terms of what compared to oil and gas. But then also in terms of this conceptual model, we're often pinning off pre-exploration, no wells, and then during exploration, 1, 2, 3, 5 wells, and then during development, we might add another few wells to that. But it's only super mature fields like Wairaki that there's a lot of wells.
Yes, a lot of wells.
A lot of wells.
Yeah.
So, given time, we're not going to do the magic of appearing cell by cell. We're gonna just run this notebook from top to bottom.
This is a short one anyway.
This is a short one, and less fun. But I actually just want to cut to the end, because the cutting to the end is real pretty.
A temperature profile is a temperature profile. There's no data crunching really to do.
No, I think the only data crunching in here, once we're loaded up, is we're using a thing called Ipython Widgets. It's a really cool tool that exists in
the sliders.
Oh, the sliders. Yeah, the sliders. It's a.
I was like, is that what it's called officially? Cool.
It's in these Jupyter notebooks. And you can basically make plots and then interact with them with sliders. My doctoral supervisor, he needs a shout out. David Dempsey is amazing. He's at the University of Canterbury. He makes the coolest Ipython notebooks for teaching. Like these fully realized full sliders. Check him out on GitHub. He actually posts his stuff on GitHub. So if you wanna see like extreme, beautiful Ipython widget usage for teaching, he's your man. This is a static plot of all of the temperature data. So what I've done is I've colored the data by time. And so you can see in the right-hand side here, you've got the PTS tool running into the well, running these logs, and you've got a first set of profiles up and down, a second and third set of profiles, third, fourth. And so the colors match to here's that first temperature log run at the first injection rate. So that lowest injection rate, then we pumped up the injection rate. You've got a second one, dropped it down halfway, you've got a third one, and then we shut the well and it does something like completely amazing. You've got like this jump up in temperature to like nearly 200 degrees Celsius.
Absolutely love that you can do this in Python, because this is similar to what I used to do manually in Excel, is like to color the profiles like in rainbow order. Like red, orange, yeah. Not because like I'm a small child that just really likes rainbows, but because everybody knows, therefore, what order they should go in.
Yeah.
And this does exactly the same thing, but like just with just a little bit of code.
But then
automatically. So cool.
But then to show the code, like here it is, it's this little bit here where we've done a color by, I want to plot the PTS data and the depth data, color it by the time delta in seconds, so the time since the start of the test. And I've just used the default color ramp and it comes out like that, which is awesome. But Katie complained about, I love the things you complain about. A little horizontal. What's that horizontal line, Irene? I'm
something
like,
wrong with the plot.
There's something wrong with your plot. I'm like, no, there's something wrong with your data. So
no, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, that's not just the profiles. That's just the whole data set chucked into a plot.
There you go. Right. So we haven't filtered out of that plot.
Also, like that sort of pressure transient looks like on a depth temperature plot. Like, because the temperature changes while the pressure does. So
yeah,
that's all that is.
It's
a temperature transient.
It is. I'm sorry, I was picking on you. I've got a little algorithm. There's a bonus notebook for how I determined this, for basically saying if the PTS tool is moving, then give me the data. And I set some limits. So if you're interested in this, go check out one of the bonus notebooks. And it basically just kills the steady data, because for the temperature data, we only want the moving data. Mm-hmm. And so here's the Ipython notebook where I actually like killed all of the times where we're just sitting in the well. And so you notice that we're now missing the stationary bits, like we've only got the moving bits. And what I've done is I've pre-primed the notebooks, because I was concerned about the sliders seem to be working okay with the live stream. That's kind of cool. So you can move the slider with your mouse or use the arrow key to the right to do like a fine scale movement. And I'm like, I want this first heating run. So the first down run after the well was shut in. I'm like, Right, there we go. And so this plot here is live linked to this little script that says, call me the results. And so it's called you the results of the number of seconds since the test started. So I'm going to take that and copy it. And as part of making my analysis repeatable, and so that Katie doesn't go back and says, why did you pick it here? I'm like, I'm going to put this in and say, first heating run. And so I've like recorded it. Oops, sorry, excuse my formatting. Dun-dun-dun. Have a live code. And I can paste my values in down here. And I've named it already first heating run. And so this little cell, it grabs only the data for that first heating run. And I'm like here grabbing the shape of that array. So a pandas data frame is like a table. It's an array that has rows. And here it has 1,200 rows. Our original data had 100,000 rows, and it has 9 columns. So what we've done is we've spliced out some data. I've got a little helper function at the top that draws a figure for you that says, okay, just show me the first heating run. You're like, oh, what's going on up here? Well, actually, this is the surface flow rate. It's the pumps. They're shut in. And so it just plots by time that first heating run. You could export this to a CSV. There's a little bit of code here to do that. And then we're going to import a stable temperature log. So a temperature log that was acquired 37 days after the well was drilled and shut in.
That's quite a short period of time. to fully heat the well.
Yeah,
by the
like
way.
there's
It's typically months.
and months.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this well's
weird.
Yeah, awesome. Pretty good one.
Yeah. And what we're going to do is we're going to calculate a thing called a boiling point for depth curve. And so this is the temperature at which fluid will boil given the pressure inside the well. And this helps us understand the shape of a temperature log. And then I'm just got some details about the well that I'm going to run up. So it's like where the casing shoes are. I ranted about datums a little bit. This is a bugbear of mine. If anybody's generating data, have a read of it, please. But let's not linger. We've got 4 minutes till the break. Right. And here it is. So you'll remember that we had on the left here, there's this is all of the data on that color ramp again. But I've done that filter where I've taken out that where the tool was held still in the well because Katie complained.
Simply a question.
Simply a question. And I've just plotted in dots the actual heating run that we extracted. And so over here on the right-hand side is that heating run that we extracted and its pressure. But the solid line is this stable temperature log. And did you want to talk about this? We've got like a couple of minutes to talk about the difference between those logs.
Which the 1 hour heating and the 37-day heating. Yeah. So you can see from the plot on the left that temperature profiles at the 3 injection rates have similar shapes. And they have extremely different shapes to the 1 hour heating, and that's just because of the completely different conditions in the well under which they're measured. So if you have a temperature log, you should always know under what, if you say this is a temperature log and you can't tell somebody, like was it shut in, was it injecting, was it producing, like
when was
how
it
long
last produced?
how long was it heating for?
Yeah.
So you can see, and this one on the right, that after approximately 1 hour the temperature profile looks like this. So and the 1 hour heating is like super useful for identifying feed zones.
Gonna look at that afterwards.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, and we're gonna look at that afterwards, but like heat very rapidly here at this depth around 750 meters, and so after 1 hour it's like 180 degrees or something.
Yeah.
And after like about a month, it's only increased like another 50 or 60 degrees. So like it all happens quite quickly.
Yeah. So this is because I actually I was the first person to successfully run standard oil and gas temperature rated tools and geothermal wells in New Zealand. Some trials were done years ago and they had some trouble.
Yeah. There was a fracture stuff?
Yeah, both. I did some petrophysics and a borehole imager and FMI. And a lot of the work we did around setting up the procedures for that was like, okay, we're running these under injection. How much do we have to eject to like not cook tools? And like, how do you think about that in terms of the field? You know, like, because you can shock logging tools if you like have a really massive temperature change, if you hit a steam feed. And so this is a great example of how we can actually get away if you're injecting into a well, running standard oil and gas tools into, you know, like you know, we've got a 225 degrees Celsius well, you know, like, and I've worked in fields up to 300 degrees Celsius where we've done the same with borehole images and petrophysical tools, and so it's really key to know your conditions.
We do have a borehole imager that goes to 300.
We do
now,
actually,
but
we
that
do
was
now.
not always the case.
And even then, like it's an acoustic tool rather than a micro resistivity.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. There's all this technology development going on with high temperature rated tools, because once you get up to these particularly high enthalpy systems, you don't want to be running things that are going to be steam shocked or these wells that heat up super quick. And so really having that mixture of like high temperature specialist tools and then leveraging some of the oil and gas tools is cool.
So a 2-second version of the fully heated temperature log. I guess you can see the dashed line is the boiling point for depth curve, which is the temperature the well has to be to boil. So you can see that below about 600 meters, the temperature in the well, which are black, are all less than boiling point for depth. So we know that, that's like liquid down there in the well. And then above 600 meters, it lies along the boiling point for depth curve, meaning that through this part, that part of the reservoir is two-phase.
That part of the well is two-phase.
That part of the conditions in the well are two-phase, and because we calculate the boiling point for depth for pure water, and we never have pure water, like this is never exact, but it's so good to plot it just to give you an idea of like what that shape's supposed to be and where you might be sitting relative to it. And then above about 350 meters, there's a steam zone in here, and then looks like some cold gas at the top.
So the concentration of salts and non-condensable gases, so CO2, affects your boiling point for depth. So but yeah, like just grabbing the steam tables for pure water is a great hack.
Cool.
That was
Break
the
time.
first half. It's break time. We're going to go on to Injectivity next. I'm excited about. We get to start doing some model fits and stuff. We're going to go grab some more water. We'll check out the Slack. I want to say at the end of this, we're going to jump into the social space for the Transform conference over in the Chateau. So if you haven't already found your way there, go ahead after this tutorial and come meet us, and we'll chat, and it'd be great to see people. So I will unshare my screen so that Matt can take over, and hopefully he's going to like put in the break time thing. Okay. Where's our Matt?
Cool. Anyway, maybe we should just...
allow. I feel like we should have some like on hold music. There's some.
Well, Matt said to mute the thing so we don't.
Are we okay? Can we go?
I daren't go near my unmute button now. Yes, absolutely. Please take it. Please take it away as you wish.
So Katie and I were reading the chat string in the Slack channel on the break, and like it's totally cracked us up. It's awesome. Keep it going, folks. Big shout out to Matthew. I am now adopting the term KCF. Data was reduced by the at Katie McLean compliant factor.
No, complaint
factor. Sorry.
Hey, I know what I want.
Yeah. And I know my role. Code it up.
Yeah, just do it, Irene.
And we also wanted to acknowledge, New Zealand had a COVID elimination strategy, so we've been normal life for an amazing long time, and I'm really conscious that we're currently live streaming to a lot of people who are in lockdown or who haven't got to hang out with their friends. Like we actually have like a girls' sleepover going on here with another girlfriend who's a numerical model. My poor partner is struggling with the the hit of Nerd Woman right now.
He's fine. He's a coder.
He's a coder. He gets it. But yeah, so big shout out for people who are doing it hard under COVID lockdowns and are missing their mates. And time with their mates.
Yeah,
so
I feel very grateful to be able to be here, sitting next to Irene
on fast internet.
Oh don't go there. Don't get me started about the internet. My house.
Anyway, so this is where the rubber hits the road, folks.
Yep.
Injectivity essays. So we got like what are we, like 40 minutes or so to get through II and flow velocity. We've talked a little bit about II. It's a freaky deaky unit. It's non-SI. I can hear David Dempsey cringing about the absence of SI unit. But in love it.
I've been down that road and I've come back to like
Tons for alphabet.
This is just, it's what's familiar. It's what we use.
It's what we use. It's not what's used everywhere. So in Indonesia, they're more SI. So big ups to the reservoir engineers in Indonesia. You guys rock.
Yeah, in Iceland they use like liters per minute per.
Yeah, I have to do the conversion every time. I'm sitting in meetings, places, and I'm just can't
doesn't matter. It's flow rate over pressure.
Flow rate over pressure. Easy as. Right. So we're gonna do that same thing. We're gonna do this one cell by cell. We're gonna run up these helper functions. Same deal, that we've got this like really huge PTS file, and it's gonna take a couple of moments to come through. But something else that we're going to do is we have this helper function which takes the flow rate data and like smudges it onto the smudges. What am I meant to say? Onto the PTS data frame. And so the PTS data frame is like 100,000 rows. The flow rate is, like I don't know, there's only maybe 1,000 or something. I can't
it's
recall.
like at least an order of magnitude.
It's at least an order of magnitude.
Many orders of magnitude, at least data.
So there's just a little linear interpolation between the two. The flow rate's not totally stable, and so it is a nice way to do it. And
always log your flow rate.
Always have a data logger on your flow rate, because it used to be that they just set a flow rate and like write it in the program. And then like you'd look at the data and you'd be like, what?
Yeah. Is this the reservoir doing something, or is my flow rate drifting? Like, you need to know. You need to know for so many reasons. And it's not hard. It's a single phase flow meter.
I'm
logger.
feeling your pain. It's like
one piece of advice.
For
anybody out there, log your flow rate.
All right, cool. We're going to input that same stable data, which, after a month is amazing. But what we're going to do is we're going to just like have a check of the data. And we can use these amazing little pandas tools where we can look at the top of the data frame or the tail, the bottom of the data frame, And so there's each of them. But actually, I made you guys a little plot so we can like look at the data and make sure it's all there. So we've switched from temperature. Now we're looking at pressure. And so we've done this like little trick again where we've like color mapped it using that time elapsed, time delta. And so all of these pressure profiles and colors match this log, but we've also plotted on that stable pressure in black. And they appear to be crossing over, Katie. Why would that be? Plant.
Well, yes, there's a whole thing. It depends if your wells, if a well is permeable enough, which is usual in New Zealand and in a lot of other places, then there will be a particular depth at which the wellbore is like so well connected into the reservoir that the pressure there barely changes. And as the well heats up, so from like all the cold injection profiles and even the 1 hour heating, it's like as the pressure profile sort of pivoted a little bit, but like not much. But then as the well heats up, then the pressure will be fixed at that very permeable depth, and all the pressures, basically, and the pressure gradient is then controlled purely by the temperature of the fluid in the wellbore.
Because it's controlling the density of the fluid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
So you can't take these
Yeah.
pressure profiles and say, hey, that's the pressure out in the reservoir.
Totally.
What
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
actually doing is the only point that reflects the reservoir is the point of the pivot point.
Yeah.
And so in my world, I really want to know that reservoir pressure profile, because I'm a sort of whole system chick. And so we take these pivot points and you look at all together as a data set, and you're like, okay, if my reservoir is fully mixed and well connected, you know, like, and there's no weird geochemical gradients or weird thermal gradients or compartments, then it's essentially a linear interpolation between
they
these.
should all fall in the same line.
They should all fall in the same line. It's
but-
not always
But
true.
very rarely.
No, very rarely. So
Yeah. Like, you know,
theoretically,
you know, one of the fields that we work in, there's like three.
Yeah.
There's three great, like the different zones in the reservoir, because there's like, they're quite well connected, you know, within like the deep reservoir or the intermediate reservoir or whatever, but there's sort of relatively impermeable bits in between.
yeah.
Because
So it's kind of compartmentalized in a way, but like vertically compartmentalized.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So
Anyway, that's another whole.
That's
subject.
another whole subject. One of these.
Yeah. If you don't have a pressure pivot, that means that your well's probably not that permeable.
Yeah. So
Anyway.
if your well's heating and these profiles are just stacking parallel, then you're not well connected out to pressure in the reservoir, and that's part of that whole story of getting at the permeability. So here's our Ipython widget again. We haven't taken out that static data because we're actually looking at that static data. And so like Katie said right at the start, oops, gone too far. We're looking for that pressure, the last stable pressure before you change the pump rate. And so I'm not going to fiddle around to do this very exactly. I just want to show you that the code works just the same. Oh, we have this problem over here where right at the last one they pumped up, shut the pumps too fast, so we could take the pressure just before. We don't want to take the, even if you grab the pressure right at the same depth.
Oh no, you can't do that.
No, it doesn't quite work. You really want it.
You get a different pressure if the tool's moving down versus if it's moving up.
Yeah, you don't want that.
You could analyze that to death and run a whole thesis on that if you wanted to, but just don't. Just make sure you measure it when the tool's stationary.
Yeah. So again, this cell is live linked to the plot. So every time you open this, it will update the plot. So you take that data and you store your data. You know, and you can write some metadata. I've written some stuff in here. The third value is selected because the tool made passes before the tool made passes because the pumps were shut off. And that means that when Katie comes to complain about my interpretation, I can be all like, yeah.
Did you read the notes?
Did you read the notes? Yeah. Right.
I'm really lovely to work with, I swear.
Yeah. So we've defined some objects here, which are those time deltas, the number of seconds since the test started. And again, I've written a little helper function that just goes into that PTS data frame and says, if you can find an exact match for that depth, for that time delta value, give me that. But if you can't, find the two values closest. And then we generate these little data frames of the two values closest. And then what I'm going to do is I make a little list of pressure and flow rate, because, you know, we were talking about doing that tons per hour per bar. So we need the flow rate from the surface and then the pressure. And they're just going to be the means of above and below. And then we return that as a little list. For the flow rate data, it's actually an array, and we're making it as an array because we're going to use the stats module from Python. There are so many ways you could skin a cat in Python for linear regression, and I tested out a whole bunch. In the end, I settled on linear regress from the stats model, just because in the next notebook, we're going to be doing this hundreds of times. We're going to be doing linear interpolations hundreds of times down the well. And this is just like kind of, according to the internet, the fastest one. And it's fast because it doesn't return a whole a whole bunch of metrics, but the machine learning folks, like they're on a whole nother level, and they have amazing packages. So what I'm doing is you generate this linear model, which is kind of like a tuple with a whole bunch of values. And then I say, the slope is going to be the first one here, the intercept of the model, and the R value is here, the sort of indication. And so we can turn it into using this like fancy way of formatting strings, makes a really cute output that has your like y equals MC, MC squared. Wow, I do need that second. It's really early here. I need that second coffee.
Grandiose.
No, that's a bit grandiose. MX plus C. Yeah, it's like y back plus C. All right. And so we can plot the results. And you can see the fit's pretty good. Like, the Katie complaint factor, we had this glance.
I hope that doesn't become a thing.
It's totally a thing. Thanks, Matt. You notice the y-intercept is like horrendously negative, and Kitty was like, "What?"
And probably just having a bad day. I think that's actually normal.
Yeah.
Anyway, that sent Irene down a rabbit hole for quite a while.
I was like, "Oh no, maybe I've done something wrong." Like, just had my serious code imposter moment.
I think you were saying I thought you were saying the slope was like 8,000 or something.
I don't know.
Like, no, the intercept's fine.
Totally, yeah. Anyway, so this well is so permeable that as it takes everything you can pump at it, right? So you can keep pumping and the pressure almost doesn't change, and that's why you have that. So
it's not actually vertical, but on that scale, it looks like it might as well be.
It's not, think about your scales. And so to give you some context, preeminent reservoir engineer, amazing guy, Malcolm Grant, total pioneer. Really, I feel really lucky to have overlapped with his career and got some FaceTime and training. That was there are so many amazing. I think we're an industry that's just had some amazing pioneers, and it's been cool to work with them.
Mercury had Malcolm Grant. Like when you started in contact, we had Paul Bixley.
And then
I would like to overlap. The other
reservoir engineering for geothermal, written by Malcolm Grant and Paul Bixley. And we had one each. Yeah, it's good. I'd like to overlap with Malcolm Grant a bit more, but I'd like to overlap with Paul more too. It's he used to be a geologist, I hear.
He was.
Oh,
he was.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's kind of cool. So Malcolm did this cool review and showed that injectivity for wells has a sort of log normal fit, like a lot of natural phenomena. But check out the injectivity. You're the center of your distribution here is about 20 tons per hour bar. And when I'm working out in the world, I'm often part of drilling and testing teams doing programs for exploration and development. I have a set of rules of thumb because there's no direct relationship because of different reservoir conditions between injectivity and productivity. If you're going to drill a producer, you can't really tell perfectly from the injectivity what that producer will look like
in a particular field.
And after a while, you get enough information about that field to do a correlation and to say you have a local rule of thumb. But these are my rules of thumb when I'm working across resources of what things are like. There's some cool work done by one of Katie's colleagues, Christine, another amazing female reservoir engineer. There's a cluster. There's a cluster. But check it out. We have 252 tons per hour per bar. Let's go tell management. You get a pay raise for this?
Yeah. I didn't drill this one. So.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So
I don't drill any wells.
So which is way off the end of this distribution, that's huge. And that's why we've got that, you see that pressure change and that fit.
Yeah.
Katie had a word of warning.
Oh yeah, when it's that high, you go, well, you shouldn't even really say it's 252 because you know the two
delusions of error.
Yeah, exactly.
Delusions
Like,
of
the
accuracy.
uncertainty on a number that high is really large because the pressure difference you're measuring
It's
for
tiny.
those planages in photo is really, really tiny. But you know, nobody, that's fine. That's a good problem to have if your number is too high to measure. Like, you know, you still know it's really, really high.
Do you have like a rule of thumb cutoff? Like if the II is above something, I just generally say, oh, it's above this.
Yeah. I actually usually just say it's much greater than 100.
Yeah. Because once you get over 100, you're talking about some mega wows.
Yeah, totally.
So great case study to have, but as you'll see in the next notebook, it means that things look pretty complex.
All right, I'll try and crack through.
Yeah.
It's
like, what were we doing? So it's like when you like write something and like, so it's been great, Matt, us to do this tutorial. I took it as like, you know, finally the motivation to sit down and do this work. And then we made something way too big for this context. All right, fluid velocities. Do you want to start talking about fluid velocities? I'm going to go and run a couple of cells to get us ahead.
Yeah, sure.
You know, like so you know, what are we actually going to do in this notebook?
Okay, well, yeah. So I'll just talk a little bit about feed zones. And what they are. So like we had that picture you can see at the top there, just indicating feed zones on there. And basically the idea is that, you know, we have these geothermal wells with these huge, great big long open hole sections. So in the whole liner, or like most of it is perforated, and, you know, so there could be a permeable connection to the reservoir at any depth. You don't know before you put the liner in where that's going to be. So once you have the liner in, or even before you have the liner in, you can do completion testing without the liner if the well's stable enough.
Yeah,
the hole conditions are stable enough that the drillers are happy. Which
the
is
drilling engineers are
very, very, very rare.
Yeah,
for them to prove that. Anyway, so there will be discrete depths at which fluid, you know, accesses the wellbore, like comes in under production or exits during injection. Sometimes comes in during injection, interestingly. Anyway, and so these depths are called permeable feed zones, or just feed zones, because, you know, permeable feed zones is too long. And that's it, really.
I mean, one of the things that I find really challenging working in geothermal and exciting working in geothermal is your distribution of feed zones changes depending on the delta pressure, the pressure difference between your well and your reservoir. And so if you're because you're talking about flow in response to that pressure driving force that between either injection, the well going out to the reservoir, or the reservoir coming into the well, if you tutu with that, if you play with that pressure difference, you end up with a different distribution of feed zones. And so as somebody who does a lot of like open hole logging and geology analysis, you know, like it's really important that I'm closely related and linked in with the reservoir engineers who are building wellbore models to understand, you know, like okay, you know, like what are we really talking about here? What are the geologic controls on these feed zones under these different conditions? And also wells change over time as well.
Yeah, totally.
As
and
the pressure conditions change, and as we like plug them up with minerals.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you often see like many feed zones at completion test, you know, like during injection, but then not all of those will flow when the well is producing.
Yeah, so. and it's kind of unequal, right? So if you have like a you know, like weak feed zone, like right below the production casing shoe, and a weak feed zone of the same magnitude tested under injection at the bottom, you know, you'll probably under production get the top one to flow, but not the bottom one, because under injection, there's a lot more pressure driving force in the bottom of the well to get fluid to exit. But you turn that around and there's not quite the driving force for the same like fracture formational gap.
But they might have the same permeability.
They might have the same permeability. It's just like the well conditions. So just like temperature logs, the well conditions are really super key. So so I'm never sort of like working with just a list of feed zones. I'm like working really close with the reservoir engineers to think about conditions. And so we're preconditioning our data again using these helper functions. If you're doing this yourself on your own data, you're going to have to like go through that first notebook process, but like bespoke to your own data to come out with like a data frame. So just signaling that again, that these are bespoke and local to this data set. And you see here, like the raw PTS is like a little over 100,000 rows. It's pretty chunky. And we've appended the flow rate to it. I always check my data after import. And so here is the impeller data. So it's in hertz, and which is 1 hertz is 60 RPM. So this thing's going around pretty fast, like really fast. And so the same style of plot that we've colored with time. And so you see these logs going up and down the well, both positive and negative hertz. Yep. Which way was which? Sorry, I'm having a blank.
I actually always forget because it doesn't really matter. Like whatever the sign convention is, like it'll be positive, it'll be spinning clockwise or anti-clockwise, depending on the,
So like one will be down the well and the other one will be up the well. And there's like a sign convention set up for the tool, and
you interpolate between them and you're the zero value. Anyway, that's right. We'll show you.
We'll do that.
What we mean.
Cool. So, but we're not quite done pre-processing your data. This is the spinner plotted in time, and we've got like the gray overlays on this. Let's turn it up for you folks. Woo.
Oh, that's better.
That's better. Sorry about that. And you can see as we plot the spinner data with time that there's all this like time where this, not only we've got the spinner steady, but where the tool is like slowing down, like spinner frequency is like dragging. So you these PTS tools are run in the well, and just before you get to the point where you're programmed to stop in the well, the tool has to slow down a little bit, and then it has a takeoff. So one of the pre-cleaning things that I've added to this is removing all of the data from this data set where the PTS tool wasn't moving. And so you'll have to whip over to the other bonus notebook to have a look into this method. I just set a bunch of filters for like, hey, look, if it's if the line speed, so the tool speed slows down or is stationary, then I'm going to take that data out. I also chomped off the data for the production casing chute, and I realized I probably shouldn't have. Oops. Wow, debugging. And now we have that new data set with all that stuff cleaned out. And so we have these spinner profiles with time where the tool has gone, like down and up and down and up and down and up, like the well, where the negatives here are going down the well and the positives going up. We're using the Ipython widgets again. And what you're using them for is you're going to have to do this 3 times is to grab each set for each rate of the PTS data. And because it's because I've already cleaned out the zeros, it doesn't have to be exact. So here's the data for the first rate. I can do this. Oops. And you can do that 3 times, once for each rate. So where we're leaving out this is the well. These are the runs after the well was shut.
Yeah, that's the 1 hour heating. So that's kind of a different thing.
So I've already done this for you guys. And so we've got the first flow rate, and we're going to use these Boolean statements again to clean out we're going to take that cleaned PTS data frame, the one where I removed the slowing tool, and we're going to generate a little data frame called PTS first rate, and we're going to use it using this start stop time. And we do that for each of our little data frames here. And there's quite a lot of data here. And then she's all like, shouldn't have left the brackets on the end. So yeah, so it's still 8,500-ish data points in there. So I'm going to run that for each of the 3 flow rates. And we can go ahead now and plot the data from one flow rate. And so whereas the plot above, we had all of these together, so you recognize these things here. So what we're going to do is we're going to replot these data to look at just one flow rate.
Yeah, because you're creating one fluid velocity profile per flow rate.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible to chuck all the data in and crunch it into one. It will give you one fluid velocity profile, but it'll be rubbish. It will.
Nonsense.
I've seen that.
Yes.
I've seen that happen when people don't understand.
Yeah. Your fluid velocity profile is only for one rate.
Yeah. It's like the profile of like what your fluid velocity is in the well under that set of injection conditions. So you're at that flow rate. And if you change the flow rate, you change the velocities. So for each change in flow rate, you get a different fluid velocity profile.
So we do fluid velocity analysis using this thing that gets called the cross-plot method. And so what I've done is I've made a section here that illustrates how a cross-plot works, but just on 1 meter of data from, I've just randomly selected the second flow rate here. And so what you do is you take that data, you get all the data that is actually there, that's not an NA. If there's any null data, the linear regression just doesn't function, right? So you want to get all the data that's not an NaN value for the frequency and the pressure. That should be tool speed. Anyway, moving right along. It's right in the other rate. And then you do a linear regression. You will debug that. And so you generate this thing called a cross plot. Come on, cross plot, be bigger. Where you've got spinner frequency against the tool speed.
Yeah, for a particular depth.
Yeah, just for that 1 meter at that a particular flow rate, just for that one flow rate. So you're not mixing flow rates, you're not mixing depths. And you're getting this intercept, this y-intercept, where theoretically the spinner is not spinning, so the tool must be moving at the same velocity as the fluid inside the well. Yeah. Did I explain that well enough?
I think so. We've got a pretty good description of it in there. But I mean, in theory, if you have a spinner on E line. So it's my magic hands. If you sit the tool, you could sit there running the tool down over and over again, trying to find the speed where the tool's going at the same speed as the water that's being injected down the well. And you could just do that by trial and error over and over again to try and find the speed at which you have to run the tool so that the spinner doesn't turn. But it would take you ages. 6 months to get that for every depth in the well. Whereas here you can just project it if you've got enough data where the tool's going faster than the water and enough data where it's going in the opposite direction to the water, which is the positive and the negative side of these plots. You can then just project, well, what would the speed have to have been at that depth.
And the
not
program
spin.
dictates that they run the tool at different rates to be able to generate these different rates. So
Yep.
those passes up and down are conducted at different tool speeds. I think the thing that we maybe didn't make enough of a mention is under injection, like, you know, that temperature profile was stepping out because a little bit of fluid leaves the well when it meets impermeability or enters the well, as we'll see in a minute. And so you have this situation where you've got a mass rate going in the top, and then the velocity of fluid inside the well is changing in response to those fluids either leaving or entering the well. Unfortunately, it also changes with well bore cross-sectional area.
Yeah, let's
leave that aside. But yeah, that's future
mention
refinement.
that at the end. But you'll see what we mean, like when you see the actual result, the fluid velocity.
So again, we've got a bunch of helper functions. It's the method broken down and then into like a little wee wrapper function. And so to calculate these 3 fluid velocities, we've selected a step size of, so we're doing these for 1/2 meter intervals in the well. And
you can choose any.
You can choose
you want.
any, like, and that depends on the data resolution.
Yeah, this data is awesome. It's
Yeah.
really high quality.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of it. It's like measures 4 times a second.
And that varies from tool to tool. So
in other data sets you could put 1/2 a meter and you might not have enough data points.
Yeah.
And that cross plot to like do a linear fit.
And so what we've done is each of these we've ended up generating a data frame that has like a depth. So for that cross plot analysis, the intercept velocity that comes from that cross plot analysis, and there's some weird ones at the bottom because of the data. Here, I think it's 30. Right. So the first few didn't have actual observations from where I set the top of this method, and then it starts to kick in here. So you end up with an intercept velocity, a slope of that fit, an R-squared value. At some point, he'll do a root mean squared error as well.
So at 462.75 meters in the well, your fluid velocity is 0.5
meters per second.
Yeah.
And you've got like the number of data points used, and then like the actual data used in that.
Yeah.
So we're going to use this trick again where we're going to be coloring, and here we're going to color by the R-squared value in one and observation value in another, just to get a bit of an idea of like the quality of so it's like saying like, what's the quality of each of these model fits? What's the quality of each of these linear interpolations? And you'll notice that on the left and the right, it's the same fluid velocity by depth data. And here we've got some outliers, like that have these sort of very low R-squared values. And we also have some plots with really low numbers of points. And I'd hazard that any cross plot analysis that has less than 6 points is not going to yield you a good model. We have some other ideas at the bottom of this notebook of it's like, I don't know, what would you call it in software world? Katie has feature requests.
Very nicely.
So of other ways we want to clean this up. So what I've done is I've set some, again, we're running with these Boolean statements to clean the pandas data frame. And so I've cleaned out, things with like low R-squared values and less than 6 data points. We're going to do this for each of the pump rate, and then we're going to have a look at this cleaned data set. And so now the cleaned one, you still see that we've got just a couple of outliers that we could look at dealing with, but we have a resultant data that is less noisy, and
you can there's
nice.
more filters you could create.
There's loads more
for
filters.
sure.
So yeah, this is a good pass. I've written a function. Please do not run this now.
It doesn't take that long, just a few minutes.
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Not so cool. Like
so
now.
It exports all of those cross plots to a file. And so you end up with this really cool
Names
thing.
them by depth.
Names
So-
them by depth. You look at your PTS, like your fluid velocity profile, and you're like, what's going on at,
Looks really weird.
look, 470. And you can actually go and look at that. And so
Does the crossplot look okay? Do I think that value is real? Like, if it doesn't look okay, what's wrong with that crossplot, and why did my filter not pick it up? Maybe I need
another filter. Another filter.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of an example. One filter that is on Katie's feature request list. Lol. Oh, where are you? Anyway, there are a couple in here where there's only negative values or only positive values. And so you can't make an intercept where you only have one end of the distribution, right? You're extrapolating outside of your data. So so that definitely should be dumped. And we will get there.
That would get rid of that random one.
Yeah. So that's actually the cause of that one there. That's because it only has data on one side of the distribution. Cool. So we're importing some contextualizing data, bar gauge to bar atmosphere. Come on, people. Good that the units are on it. Know if you're in bar gauge or bar atmosphere, where the difference is, one is the measured and one accounts for the atmospheric pressure. And if you go comparing those two together without knowing what the units are, you could get in a bit of a wangle.
Yeah. There's always this +1 thing going on.
Yeah. Depending on your elevation, because I've worked on a project on the Altiplano in Chile, 4,300 was the base elevation. And so you're when you're doing your reservoir engineering and you're thinking about plant design and things like that, you have to really think about the physics of your context.
Yeah.
So this is a Katie plot. What else can we put in here? That's awesome. I love it. Matplotlib is like this amazing Python plotting library. Okay, it's not one line of code. You could do some great stuff with Seaborn. And to be honest, you can look at this data using some of the amazing pre-built tools like Seaborn and Plotly. And I really recommend that people who are looking into doing this have a look at those. But the customization for final products, like if I was making some final member report, this is not just for us to smack around some data. Matplotlib gives amazing control.
I'm over the moon about this because I make plots they don't look quite as nice, but similar thing, but by drawing transparent boxes on top of them,
Excel files,
and then screenshotting them, because you can never get the boxes to export, and it's never very good resolution.
And these feed zones, these great,
and you've got them going automatically across both plots.
Yeah. So there's this so Katie sent me a list of feed zones. She told me what the two biggest ones were. And then I just swapped them on. And
that was my interpretation of where I think the feed zones are as well.
With the text as well, for the feed zone labels. And so it's just if this is something that you want to do, I do write some spaghetti code for plotting. I love being a geologist. I'm all about the color pencils, and Python's just become a new color pencil for me. So Katie's comment when we threw this up was, wow, we picked a really complex well to share with people.
Yeah. So it was sort of too late by then. I thought, was that the best example to do for this tutorial? And, chose that data set because it's one that I was actually involved in, so I do know this well.
The resolutions are
and the
amazing.
Data is just fantastic.
It's such an awesome tool.
It's the best spinner design in the world. Just really high quality data,
super high resolution, so gorgeous to work with. But then you've got this.
Yeah, I know. So we'll just do a quick.
We've got I don't know, 9 minutes. Go.
God. Oh, so I've done this interpretation of where I think there are feed zones in this well. You can see they're labelled feed zone 1 to 8. And there's this table down here, upper bound and lower bound of, I think, where the feed zone. I mean, there's not much well that isn't feed zone in this. You know,
I feel like, it's over 250 tons per hour per bar.
yeah.
It's like it's over an order of magnitude larger than the mean geothermal well.
Yeah.
So
it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it's 252 tons per hour per bar and it's only got one small feed zone, but
Are you sure? Yeah, you sure?
Yeah. So in this table, I won't talk about every single one of the 8 feed zones, but there's features from the data that are used to make that interpretation. One of the reasons this well is complicated is that it's got these 2-phase feeds in the upper part that change their behaviour based on the injection rate.
So that 2-phase is a mixture of steam and water. So you've got like it's just so permeable and it's boiling and you've got that steam and water injecting into the well.
Yeah, totally. So like I'll talk about like a more normal response from like a 2-phase. So like if you look at feed zone number 4, in the table, you can say I've interpreted that based on the microphone's in the way. Spikes in the fluid velocity. So you can see feed zone 4, there are these like spikes you see in the fluid velocity at every injection rate. The spikes do subside below the feed zone, so it's not like a large amount of fluid has entered the well. It's just like very high energy 2-phase fluid, like kind of coming in sideways into the well. And
so to back away from it for a minute, like simple GeoBrain moment, when you're reading this plot from top to bottom, you can imagine that there's some fluid coming in here at the production casing shoe. So you've got this highest rate, this middle rate, and this lowest rate. And then a bit of fluid leaves the well when the plot values go to the left, or fluid enters the well when the plot values go to the right. And so at this lowest injection rate, you couldn't overcome this zone here where fluid was injecting into the well.
Yeah.
But at these higher injection rates, it was enough like injection, enough pressure, shifts the liquid level a little bit, that you can overcome that zone and you actually have fluid exiting the wells. And so that's that whole dynamic behavior, feed zones, which makes this one particularly exciting and tough.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like it's a bit unusual to see like a feed zone being overcome like the top one, but then to still have these feed zones
coming in
underneath. So it must be something particular about that upper feed zone.
It's such a cool data set.
Yeah. Anyway, so feed zone 4, you get these spikes in the fluid velocity, and you see like increases in the temperature gradient, and you also see this like very rapid heating at that depth.
That's that shut run.
After the 1 hour heating. Yeah. So that's kind of a kind of more normal one. Actually, probably even like a better, more easy to understand example is like feed zone 6, where like the fluid velocities they're kind of steady through this bit, like just above 800 meters. Injection rates, like nothing's happening during this interval, and then starting at 800 meters down to 830 or whatever that is, the fluid velocity is dropping. So, and that means that the fluid is exiting the well bore there, and it's very clear that that's happening at all injection rates. You'll notice that there's like barely any noticeable temperature response during injection when you wouldn't necessarily expect there to be when fluid's exiting, unless it's like one of the really deep ones. But you do notice there's a bit of a sort of inflection in the 1 hour heating, which can give you a clue as well. So when you interpret the feed zones, you don't always see a response in every single profile.
No.
Like sometimes you see fluid velocity, sometimes you see the injection temperature, sometimes you see the 1 hour heat up, the pressure control point, which we don't have in this example.
And sometimes the
Temperature
geologist rocks
too.
up and says, but I'm not sure about the depth, like there's no fracture there.
Yeah, and then you can correlate with the fracture data set, which is another whole thing.
Another whole thing.
Really,
Katie's
really cool.
done some cool work with that. Because this
with
well
Cecile at GNS.
and Cecile,
yeah.
And so this well is being logged with this perforated liner already spotted into the well, right? So Alex on Slack asked if you would do an investigation of these zones with packers. Like once you've spotted this perf liner, you can't run packers, you can't isolate these zones.
Yeah.
Also, and it's a lot of talk for geothermal. We often have trouble measuring the frac gradient, the leak off test. It's one of my particular interest areas, and just like the packet technology often doesn't handle the temperature requirements of these wells.
That's what Ralph tells me.
And he's Ralph is an amazing drilling engineer. So you have these moments where you're like, Ralph, are we allowed to do this? And he's like,
can we do it? No.
no.
Because I think they've actually tried packers.
Yeah.
In some geothermal, maybe just up in the casing or something.
Yeah.
There's issues with high temperature, which possibly could be overcome, but it wouldn't help us anyway in this case because
we've
you've
spotted
got
the liner.
perforated liner. So you pack off, the bit inside, then the fluid will just flow out the perforated holes down the annulus and then back in again. So you can't actually isolate them.
So we're bunting up against the end of our time. I know we've slung through these notebooks real quick, but there's
but I think there's pretty good notes.
I think there's a lot of notes. They're documented pretty heavy. Where I would love to see this go is in geothermal for us to start, generating a shared open source data set. I want shared open source. Well, I want some open access data, but I also want to see us generating open source tools because the margin on geothermal development is really low, per energy that you're getting out of it. And so often we're in situations where, we just can't afford the fancy tooling. But I think with the capacity of the industry, that's geothermal is really well known for innovation, that we could generate open source things that people can pick up and use, and particularly for a lot of smaller companies are trying to do things. So that's kind of my my plug and push for there's a geothermal hackathon happening with the World Geothermal Congress. Join the Slack channel for Software Underground. Come be part of that community. Even if you've never coded before, it's the relationship between people who are domain experts, like my friend Katie, and people who code that generate actually the really useful tools. So I think that we should
I code.
Do that.
You
do code. Yeah.
Trial and error.
Trial and error code. And you will know now that you have a toy. A Katie toy. Do you have any final?
Just please use it, play with it, send us your questions, send them to Irene.
Or in the Slack channel. Come see us afterwards at the chateau.
Yes,
we're going to hop into the chateau. So so if you're watching this live, we're going to come hang out in the chateau for a little bit.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of people out there that could take this as a base and modify the code,
do
add
amazing stuff,
different styles of analysis, add filters, modify
and it's really easy to do that and never get around to open sourcing it again. But I'd love to maybe make this a project on GitHub, and if you're really into this sort of thing, come find me. Let's make a community around building open source logging and testing tools. So I think that's it. gonna stop sharing. I don't know if Matt's. Oh, Matt, you are still here.
I'm still here. I'm still here. Yeah, I didn't fall through the trap door this time. Thank you so much, both of you. That's, it's just fantastic. Not only to see, all this amazing technical content that you've put together and clearly put a lot of thought and effort into, but also just bringing such passion and enthusiasm to the subject. And I also I really appreciated how you didn't leave anybody behind, right? You've really brought everyone along with you, and so
we couldn't tell.
No, I loved it. Really, really lovely tutorial. So thank you so much for that. There's been lots and lots of chat that I'm sure you'll have fun catching up with in the Slack. This was the last tutorial. We finished on a real high note, so I'm really happy about that. Yeah, so amazing to close out with that. Yeah,
To the chateau.
to the chateau, exactly. So we'll go meet in the gather. Like and subscribe this video, of course, and look forward to more from you two, I hope, in the future. That would be fun. If I can get my Kiwi bingo card ready in time, then we'll definitely have you back. We'll definitely have you back. Anyway.
Yeah, sorry about our accents.
I'm absolutely here for it.
Here for a while.
Yeah, we're basically it's Anzac weekend this weekend, right?
Yes,
Australian and
Sunday.
New Zealand Army Corps. So Australians and New Zealanders are like brothers and sisters. We talk loads of smack about each other. But you never talk smack about them. So Penny's a South Australian.
I'm a Kiwi now.
Yeah.
Adopted Kiwi.
That was a past life.
So, thanks, Matt, for organizing an amazing event and for including
100%.
us and being so active about not only generating diversity around who is here and presenting, but also around industries. And in geothermal, we often feel kind of small compared to the giantness of some of the other industries. And we've really enjoyed being involved here.
Yeah, brilliant. Awesome. All right. Well, see you all anon, and have a great rest of day. And hope to see you in the castle.
Cool. See you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye.